The millionaire was devastated after having his marriage proposal rejected, but everything changed when a homeless young woman, until then invisible to people's eyes, awakened in him feelings he never imagined could exist. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Chloe felt the cold creeping up her legs, even through the few layers of clothing she wore. It was early evening, and the wind swept through the block decorated with Christmas lights and ornaments like icy blades. From where she sat, leaning against the wall of a cafe that had already closed, she could see people hurrying past, carrying shopping bags and chatting on their phones. The display window beside her still showcased sparkling ornaments that made her smile, reminding her of childhood Christmases filled with music and the scent of cookies, and a warmth that now seemed so far away. Despite all the discomfort, Chloe's face retained a glimmer of hope. Perhaps it was her naturally optimistic personality that kept her from succumbing to despair. Or maybe it was the certainty that somewhere, opportunities still awaited discovery. Every so often she extended an empty mug, hoping someone might drop a few coins or offer any help that could provide her with a meal for the evening. Snowflakes began to fall, and the colorful lights reflected on the damp asphalt, creating a scene that, for many, would feel almost magical. But from Chloe's perspective, the Christmas charm carried a weight of uncertainty, cold, and a deep yearning for change. While staring into the distance, imagining what it would be like to have a warm place to spend the night, she noticed a tall, well-dressed man stepping out of an imposing building across the street. He wore a suit, his jacket open despite the biting cold, and was loosening his tie as if he desperately needed air. His expression held something Chloe immediately recognized: sadness. Not a fleeting melancholy, but an intense pain that seemed to weigh down every step he took. The sight stirred something in her heart. Chloe wasn't afraid to approach strangers, especially when she sensed a deep sorrow in their eyes. As he crossed the street, distracted, he narrowly avoided being hit by a taxi that screeched to a halt. The driver cursed, but the man seemed numb, lost in his thoughts. Chloe impulsively stood up, clutching the mug to her chest, and watched the stranger pass by without noticing her. Yet, something about his demeanor awakened her compassion. She approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. What could she say to someone she barely knew? Perhaps a simple "good evening" or a gentle inquiry would suffice. Chloe decided to take a chance with a timid greeting. "Hey, are you all right? You seem a bit shaken." The man stopped and looked up at her for the first time. His gaze was lost, full of anguish. He held a small velvet box in his fingers, which Chloe guessed was a gift or a piece of jewelry. His eyes glistened with restrained tears. He took a deep breath before replying, "No, I'm not all right at all." Chloe nodded. There was no way to feign surprise. It was clear the man was devastated. Summoning her courage, she continued, "Do you want to talk? Sometimes it helps to get things off your chest." He hesitated, glancing around. The street was still bustling, but no one seemed to notice the two of them amidst the holiday rush. For the man, there was something almost surreal about receiving attention from someone who, he quickly realized, didn't even have a place to call home. Yet here she was, showing concern for his pain. "My name is Chloe," she said, trying to create a more comfortable atmosphere. "I'm Dylan," the man replied in a faint voice, slipping the velvet box into his pocket. For a moment, they stood in silence. Dylan looked at the young woman with dark skin, much younger than him, dressed in a worn coat that barely shielded her from the cold. Snow dusted the ends of her hair, yet her face exuded a surprising serenity. He asked, curious and slightly worried, "Are you out here in this cold with nowhere to go?" Chloe shrugged, her smile unwavering. "Yeah, things got tough for me. I lost my job, then couldn't pay the rent. I've been going from shelter to shelter, but sometimes they're full, and I end up sleeping on the street." Dylan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Moments ago, his thoughts had been consumed by the humiliation of being rejected by his girlfriend. Now he was faced with an entirely different reality. "And how can you stay so calm?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. Chloe took a deep breath, pulling back her shoulders. "I don't know. I guess I have no choice but to hold on to hope. You know, the Christmas lights bring back good memories. Sometimes a small, happy memory is all you need to keep going." Dylan placed a hand in his pocket, feeling the velvet box he carried. His mind flashed back to the moment when Grace, the woman he had hoped to spend his life with, had practically thrown the engagement ring back at him in front of a crowd. The humiliation still burned in his chest. "I suppose you're right. Life can be so cruel. But we have to cling to something, don't we?" The gruff clearing of a throat interrupted them. A stocky man approached, arms crossed, his brows furrowed. He was a security guard from a nearby store and was glaring at Chloe as though she were an inconvenience. "You girl, move along. I can't have you loitering here." Chloe stepped back, accustomed to such treatment. Often she left without a word, knowing her presence bothered people. But this time, Dylan intervened, still shaken yet emboldened by a sudden courage. "Excuse me, but she's not bothering anyone. We're just talking." The guard scoffed. "Sir, she's sitting on the sidewalk begging for money. That drives customers away." Dylan frowned. "I don't see any customers here right now, and even if there were, that's no excuse to treat someone like this." The tension mounted. The guard took a step forward, imposing as though ready to use force if necessary. Chloe's heart raced, and she gently tugged at Dylan's sleeve. "Don't worry about it. I'll leave. I don't want any trouble." But Dylan stood his ground. He had already endured enough humiliation for one day and couldn't simply turn his back on another injustice. "No, Chloe. You're not going anywhere because of him." The guard clenched his fists, glaring at Dylan. The confrontation might have escalated if another store employee hadn't whistled, calling the guard back inside. With one last irritated look at Dylan, the guard stomped off. Only then did Chloe realize her hands were trembling, not just from the cold but from the adrenaline of the situation. Dylan exhaled deeply. "I don't think we can stay here much longer. Let's find somewhere safe." He opened his wallet, seeing some cash and cards, enough to afford something more decent. Without hesitation, he looked at Chloe. "Come with me. Let's find a place, even if it's just a simple hotel, for you to spend the night." Chloe's eyes widened and she quickly shook her head. I appreciate it, but I can't accept that. You've already done so much by standing up for me. You don't have to take care of me." "But I want to," he replied instantly. "I can't explain it, but you've made me realize that despite everything, there's still kindness in the world. I don't want to leave you out here alone." She bit her lip, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. It wasn't common to encounter someone willing to help without ulterior motives. "All right. Thank you. But only if you promise that if things get difficult, I can leave without any hard feelings." Dylan nodded, and the two walked side by side under the twinkling lights strung along trees and lampposts. Occasionally, Chloe glanced at Dylan, noticing how he still clung to his loosened tie. Each step seemed to fill his mind with bitter memories of his failed proposal. Yet, he appeared to have found a new sense of purpose. After a few blocks, they reached a modest hotel with a sign whose lights were partially burned out. Dylan held the door open for Chloe. She stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the lobby and shivering slightly with relief. The receptionist raised an eyebrow but said nothing at the sight of the man in a suit and the young woman in worn clothes. Dylan took a deep breath, holding his card, ready to book a room. Chloe watched him, still struggling to believe what was happening. That night promised to be the beginning of an unexpected change in both their lives. Chloe smiled, surprised by Dylan's kindness, as he held the door open for her. Neither of them knew that this encounter would change their lives forever. Chloe couldn't hide her fascination as she stepped into the small hotel's lobby. The warm air inside was a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside, a simple detail that made all the difference for someone who had spent so many nights exposed to the elements. Her body began to relax, though she remained wary. Beside her, Dylan adjusted his blazer, as if trying to adapt to the new situation as well. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses hanging from her neck, gave the unlikely pair a curious glance as they approached the desk. "Good evening," Dylan said, almost in a whisper. "I'd like a room, please." The woman glanced him up and down before turning her gaze to Chloe, noting her worn, stained clothes, evidence of hardship and scarcity. Chloe blushed, feeling awkward, while Dylan pulled out his wallet. He started to hand over his card, but the receptionist hesitated for a few seconds before responding. Her eyes held a million unspoken questions. "Of course. We have a room on the second floor. It has a double bed and a small heater." Chloe immediately shook her head, feeling the need to clarify. "No, I just need a place to sleep. I don't want to be a bother." Dylan, noticing her discomfort, took a deep breath and exchanged a determined look with the receptionist. "Put it in my name, please." The woman typed some information into an old, creaking computer and returned the card. Dylan signed the receipt as Chloe avoided eye contact, still unused to relying on others. In recent times, she'd learned to fend for herself, and the sudden change made her uneasy. Once the payment was completed, Dylan grabbed the key and gestured for Chloe to follow him down the softly lit hallways. The room was modest, illuminated by a simple bedside lamp. A small piece of furniture stood next to the bed, and an old tube TV rested on a wobbly table. The air carried a mix of mold and disinfectant, but to Chloe, it felt like a palace compared to the freezing streets. She glanced at Dylan, who watched her from the corner of his eye, the key still in his hand. I don't know how to thank you," Chloe said in a soft voice, avoiding direct eye contact. "There's no need to thank me. After all, you helped me too," Dylan replied, offering a faint smile. "Helped you? Me?" She frowned in disbelief. "I barely have a place to stay." He shrugged, moving toward the window. The curtains were tattered but managed to block out some of the streetlight's glow. "Actually, you gave me something no one else has today. Empathy." Chloe recalled how she had approached him on the sidewalk, sensing his pain. Indeed, she had insisted he open up to her, even as a stranger. Perhaps that had meant more to Dylan than she realized. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, gesturing toward the bathroom. "Take a shower, rest. I'll wait outside in the hallway if you don't mind." Her face lit up at the mention of a hot shower. It had been far too long since she'd seen a decent one. She was eager to wash away the grime that seemed to cling to both her skin and her spirit. "All right, but you don't have to stay out there too long. It's cold." "I'll manage," he replied with a slightly awkward wink before stepping out and closing the door. Chloe locked herself in the bathroom. The warm water cascading from the shower brought an unexpected sense of renewal. She closed her eyes and, for a few minutes, imagined her life heading in a different direction, free from uncertainty. She let the water wash away not just the dirt, but also a fraction of the fear she carried. Meanwhile, Dylan paced the hallway, his thoughts troubled. He remembered Grace, her hands pushing away the ring he had chosen so carefully. He could still feel the weight of her rejection, but now something else gnawed at him. Why hadn't Grace cared at all about making a scene during a Christmas celebration in front of others? The public humiliation was hard to swallow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box, almost opening it before stopping himself. A few minutes later, the door to the room opened. Chloe reappeared, a towel wrapped around her hair and wearing a clean t-shirt and sweatpants Dylan had hastily bought from the lobby shop while she finished her shower. She looked like a different person. Rested, with glowing skin and a relieved expression. But her gaze still carried a hint of apprehension. "I don't know how to thank you for these clothes," she said, lightly tugging at the sleeves. "It's been so long since I've had anything new." I'm glad they fit. I just guessed your size, Dylan admitted, stepping closer to hand her a jacket he'd also purchased. Chloe slipped on the jacket, hugging it to feel the soft fabric. It was amazing to have something so simple yet so precious. Do you want to talk a bit about what happened earlier? She asked, fixing her hair. You mentioned a rejection. He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed with his palms resting on his knees. It was Grace. I was going to propose to her. Actually, I did. And she said no, in front of her friends, in the middle of a Christmas toast. Chloe's heart tightened. She had seen rejection on the streets, but this kind of pain was different. I'm sorry. It's funny, Dylan continued with a humorless smile. I worked so much I didn't even notice how cold things had gotten between us. I thought I could fix everything with an expensive ring. She nodded thoughtfully. Maybe she wanted more time and attention than a ring, right? He ran a hand through his hair, still unsure how to process it all. Yeah, I think I got so caught up in work. My boss demanded so much and I just kept going. I wanted success, his approval. It cost me my relationship. Chloe grabbed the plastic chair resting against the wall and sat across from him. From what little I know of you, you seem like a good person. Maybe you just prioritize the wrong things, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve love. Dylan offered a small smile, recognizing the sincerity in her voice. It was fascinating how someone in such a precarious situation could have such a generous heart. Thanks for saying that. She fell silent for a moment, as if gathering the courage to share her own story. My problem was a bit different. I worked as a waitress in a diner. Then the owner had to cut costs, and I was the one who got let go. After that, paying rent became impossible. Nobody rolls out the red carpet when you lose your job. Dylan nodded, his attention genuine. And you didn't have help from family or friends? Chloe shook her head, looking away. My dad died when I was little, and my mom, well, we're not close. To be honest, I didn't want to be a burden. I ended up in this cycle where I couldn't get back on my feet. The brief silence between them was heavy with empathy. Dylan felt an even stronger desire to help her, not out of pity, but because he saw a rare strength in her, a courage to face life that he wasn't sure he had. Let's go downstairs for some food, Dylan suggested, trying to lighten the mood. This place must have a working diner. Chloe agreed. They took the creaky old elevator that groaned with every floor. When they arrived at the small diner in the lobby, they found a simple counter and a few empty tables. The tired-looking cook prepared sandwiches for each of them, accompanied by hot soup that felt like a feast in the cold weather. They spoke little during the meal, exchanging occasional glances and small smiles. Chloe was aware that Dylan was still haunted by Grace, while he wrestled with a whirlwind of new emotions. As they were finishing, Dylan's phone buzzed on the table. He frowned at the screen. It was his boss. The notification showed the subject line of an urgent email. He sighed, reluctant to disrupt the fragile peace he'd found, but opened it anyway. The message mentioned a pending report and an unmissable meeting, even on a holiday night. Chloe noticed the tension in his face. Work email? Dylan nodded, glaring at the phone as if it were an enemy. They never let up. They think the world revolves around spreadsheets and contracts. She set down her utensils, leaning across the table. I get that work is important, but sometimes we forget about other things in life. Isn't that what drove you and Grace apart? He nodded, realizing he was caught in an invisible chain. Yeah, exactly. Chloe tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, deep in thought. Well, I still think you shouldn't give up on love, or work. But maybe there's a way to balance things. Dylan looked at her with curiosity. Do you think I should try to win Grace back? If it's true love, yes. But if it's just to prove you can, maybe it's time to move on. Chloe replied honestly. After all, if she loved you, she wouldn't have rejected you so harshly, right? He remained silent, reflecting on her words. It felt strange to receive romantic advice from someone he'd just met, especially someone in such a precarious situation. Yet Chloe's perspective made sense. By the end of their conversation, Dylan's expression seemed lighter, as if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. He made one last suggestion before they returned to their rooms. "Maybe you can help me. My thoughts are all over the place. A different perspective could really help." Chloe offered a small smile, still feeling a bit uncertain. "If that's what you need, I'll do my best." They walked together down the hallway toward their rooms. The night was quiet, and outside, the snow continued to fall. Through the window, they could see the faint glow of a street lamp and the occasional passing car. Dylan stopped in front of Chloe's door, holding the bags of clothes they had purchased for her. "Thanks again for everything," he said. "No, thank you," she replied, adjusting her new jacket. "Good night." He gave a slight nod and walked down the hall, heading toward his own room. Each step felt heavier, his mind turning over thoughts of Grace, work, and the uncertainties ahead. Then his phone buzzed again in his pocket. With a tired sigh, Dylan pulled it out and swiped at the screen. His eyes widened as he read the new message, drawing in a deep breath as though bracing himself for what lay ahead. The message informed him that Grace would be attending an important dinner with his boss. Dylan glanced at Chloe's door and realized he might need her help sooner than he had anticipated. Dylan barely slept the night before. The message he had received in the hotel hallway echoed in his mind like an incessant siren. The dinner was set for the following week with confirmed attendance from Grace and, of course, his boss. Always demanding, always ready to judge. He had spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering why he still hoped to resolve the situation in a way that wouldn't leave him even more broken. By the time he finally managed to drift off, the first rays of sunlight were already casting shadows on the curtains. Early in the morning, he left his room and headed straight for Chloe's. He knocked softly, uncertain if she was still asleep. A few feet away, a housekeeper with a cleaning cart eyed him suspiciously, but he simply offered an awkward smile, waiting for Chloe to answer. When the door finally opened, she was rubbing her eyes, trying to focus on his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked, sounding concerned. Dylan shook his head but remained tense. "Not exactly, but we need to talk. I've just confirmed that my boss and Grace will be at a very important dinner next week. I'm torn between going alone or trying some way to—" His voice faltered for a moment. Chloe noticed his unease and stepped aside to let him in. The room still smelled of the heater, and the blankets were crumpled in a corner of the bed. She sat on the edge of the mattress while Dylan remained standing, his shoulders stiff with tension. "Do you think it's wise to face Grace again so soon?" she asked carefully, not wanting to sound intrusive. He sighed. "Honestly, I don't have much of a choice. My boss will be there, and the company partners expect me to attend. And Grace, too. As much as I feel anger and sadness, something tells me I need to settle this. Maybe I'll try to win her back, or maybe I just want to prove that I've moved on. I'm not sure yet." Dylan stared at the carpet, his expression conflicted. Chloe clasped her hands in her lap, uncertain how to help him. Deep down, a pang of insecurity tugged at her. What did she, a homeless girl, have to do with a world of millionaires, lavish dinners, and business contracts? "And what can I do to help?" she ventured, though the thought of getting directly involved made her anxious. "You know, ever since that night, I've been thinking, you have this way of helping me see things more clearly." He looked at her, almost fearful of her judgment. "I'd like you to come with me to the dinner. It would show that I'm doing well, that I have someone by my side, and also—" His voice wavered. "I really need moral support." Chloe's eyes widened. She had never imagined that Dylan would consider taking her to such an event. Her palms grew sweaty, and her heart raced. "Me? But Dylan, look at me!" She gestured to her worn clothes and the fact that she didn't even have a stable place to stay. I wouldn't even know how to act at a dinner like that. What if I embarrass you? He pulled a chair closer and sat in front of her. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. And if Grace or my boss try to look down on you, I'll be there. He took a deep breath. Just trust me on this. Chloe hesitated. She thought about the judgmental stares, the risk of being humiliated in front of powerful people, but she also remembered how Dylan had stood up for her when a security guard tried to kick her out. He could have walked away and pretended not to know her, but he chose to stay. That weighed heavily on her decision. All right, she finally said, but don't blame me if things go wrong. Dylan's face lit up. I promise. Later, the two left the hotel on foot, stepping through slushy patches of melted snow on the sidewalks. Dylan explained that he wanted to take her to a clothing store, not something too fancy, but somewhere she could find something appropriate for the dinner. Chloe grew nervous at the thought, imagining the prices and how difficult it would be to face the salespeople. It didn't take long for them to reach a department store, its windows adorned with reindeer and twinkling lights. Inside, Chloe felt overwhelmed by the racks filled with clothes. A mix of excitement and insecurity swelled within her. It had been so long since she had tried on new clothes. Dylan insisted she choose whatever she wanted. Chloe started with the simple dress section, wary of the price tags. But Dylan watched her every move with a mix of tenderness and determination. When she hesitated over an expensive item, he insisted, "Don't worry, Chloe. This is an important investment." He gave her a shy smile. "And besides, it's my gift to you." She blushed, unsure whether to feel grateful or embarrassed, but she agreed to try on a few options. Inside the fitting room, the mirror reflected her reality without mercy, highlighting every detail of her struggles. Yet, as she slipped on the first dress, a deep burgundy with a waist-defining cut, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: dignity. She stepped out of the fitting room hesitantly, wondering what Dylan would think. His eyes lifted from his phone and he nearly let out a whistle of surprise. "You look—" He smiled, genuinely. "Beautiful." She smiled back, bashful. "Thank you." After choosing a few more items, they added shoes, accessories, and a jacket to their haul. Chloe tried walking in high heels in the shoe section but nearly stumbled, eliciting a hearty laugh from Dylan and an embarrassed giggle from herself. She clung to his arm for balance. "I'm not used to this," she murmured, laughing at herself. "Don't worry, you'll do great," he reassured her. Their moment was interrupted when Dylan's phone rang. He answered it, glancing at Chloe from the corner of his eye. On the other end, his boss's stern voice emphasized the dinner's importance and casually mentioned that Grace would be wearing her finest gala dress. Dylan closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of the added pressure. "Yes, sir. I'll be there. Don't worry," was all he said before ending the call. Chloe noticed the tension in his face as he hung up. "Sounds like things are pretty serious." Dylan nodded, taking a deep breath. "They expect me to show up perfectly. And more than that, they expect me to seem stable. To my boss, that means projecting success not just professionally, but personally." As they discussed the situation, they reached the checkout counter. Chloe nearly backed out when she saw the total on the register, but Dylan didn't flinch. He paid and thanked the cashier, who eyed the two curiously. On the way out, they stopped at a cozy cafe. The soft music and the scent of freshly baked cake provided a brief respite from the stress surrounding them. Sitting at a small table in the corner, they sipped cappuccinos and, for a moment, almost forgot the drama in their lives. "How should we handle the dinner?" Chloe finally asked. "Do you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend or something?" Dylan rested his cup on the table, thoughtful. "I don't think we need to label anything. Let's just act like good friends. And, if Grace asks, we'll show that I'm in good company." Chloe nodded but felt a pang in her chest. Knowing Dylan was still unsure whether he wanted to win Grace back or just prove something left her conflicted. She didn't want to interfere in his life, but at the same time, she was growing attached to something she couldn't quite define. As they walked back to the hotel, they ran into one of Dylan's former colleagues. The man's eyes widened upon seeing Chloe with Dylan holding shopping bags. "Dylan? Wow, long time no see. And you're doing well?" The man cast a curious glance at Chloe, subtly sizing her up. "Yes, we're heading out." Dylan tried to end the conversation quickly, but the man pressed on. "I thought you were always with Grace." Chloe felt a sting, but kept her expression neutral. Dylan cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Things change. Catch you later, okay?" He managed to extricate himself, walking silently beside Chloe until they neared the hotel. Finally, she broke the silence. "You still want to win Grace back, don't you? Is that really what you want?" He stopped briefly, watching the street traffic. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to show her I've changed, that I can be more attentive. But I don't know if that's love or just wounded pride." Chloe swallowed hard, realizing that if Dylan chose to go back to Grace, she might not have a place in his life. The air between them felt heavy, yet unspoken. Back in the hotel room, Chloe unpacked the bags, laying out the new dress and shoes. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric, feeling a shiver of anxiety. It wasn't just about the gala dinner. It was the realization that she was about to step into a world so far removed from her own, with the ever-present possibility of failure. Dylan leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair with a sigh. "Well, we need to rest. The dinner's not far off, and we need to prepare mentally, too." Chloe nodded. "Yeah, we'll see how it goes." As Dylan checked his phone for another notification, his boss confirmed the dinner time. The mere sight of the message made Dylan place a hand over his chest, as if steadying his breathing. Chloe saw his expression and felt a knot form in her stomach. Trying to reassure her, Dylan smiled faintly. "It'll be okay, right?" She forced a smile in return, but wasn't sure she believed it. With a wave, Dylan left the room, leaving Chloe alone with the bags. She gazed at the new dress hanging in the soft glow of the lamp, her fingertips brushing the smooth fabric. The weight of the situation bore down on her as she whispered to herself, her mind racing. Chloe stared at the dress, questioning whether this bold step would change her life for the better or shatter it completely. The day of the dinner arrived shrouded in a thin, almost palpable tension. From early in the morning, Chloe felt butterflies in her stomach, fully aware that the evening would not be just another event. It would be a trial by fire. As she prepared herself in the hotel room, adjusting the newly acquired burgundy dress, she tried to steady her trembling hands. It wasn't just the fear of tripping in her heels, but also the anxiety of facing Grace and Dylan's famous boss, people who seemed to inhabit an entirely different world from hers. Dylan knocked on the door in the early evening, dressed in an impeccable suit. His hair was neatly styled and he wore an encouraging smile, though his eyes betrayed a subtle nervousness. When Chloe opened the door, he paused for a moment, unable to say anything at first. He just stared, impressed by her elegance. Chloe, in turn, felt her cheeks heat up, as she had never been so well dressed. Yet Dylan's gaze was a reassuring sign of approval. "You look stunning," he said, breaking the silence. "Ready to go?" "Ready as I'll ever be," Chloe joked, glancing down at the heels she wore with a hint of insecurity. "I can't promise I won't trip, but I'll do my best not to embarrass us." He chuckled and offered his arm. "If you stumble, I'll catch you." They descended to the hotel reception, crossing the lobby where the familiar receptionist gave them a curious smile. Outside, a car sent by Dylan's company awaited them, making Chloe catch her breath at the realization of how formal the evening would be. Once seated in the plush back seats, the gentle yet powerful hum of the engine filled the air as they left the modest hotel entrance behind. The city shimmered with holiday decorations, and the drive to the upscale restaurant glowed with twinkling lights and adorned trees. Inside the car, Dylan explained the evening's stakes. My boss organizes these events around Christmas every year. It's a mix of a celebration and an opportunity to seal deals. He often evaluates everyone's behavior outside the office environment. So, any misstep could count against you. Chloe swallowed hard, feeling an even greater weight on her shoulders. I don't want to mess anything up for you. Don't worry, we won't let anyone bring us down, Dylan reassured her, attempting to sound confident. When they arrived at the restaurant, Chloe was taken aback by its imposing facade. A sleek entrance framed with glass and red neon led into a luxurious interior where a valet in a sharp black uniform approached to take the car. As soon as Chloe stepped out, she caught her reflection in the mirrored entrance. She swallowed her insecurities and straightened her posture. Dylan gently touched her elbow, a silent signal that he was there for her. Inside, the Christmas decorations contrasted with the sophisticated ambiance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and dark upholstered furniture complemented the pristine tablecloths laid out with precision. Soft holiday music played in the background, enhancing the elegant atmosphere. As they entered the grand hall, some eyes turned their way. Chloe's heart raced, but she tried to remain composed. Dylan spotted some colleagues from a distance, offering polite nods. Suddenly, a familiar female voice sounded behind them. Dylan? What a surprise to see you here so early. It was Grace, wearing an elegant blue dress with a neckline clearly designed to attract attention. Her perfectly styled hair and calculated smile signaled her intent to make an impression. Her gaze landed on Chloe, scrutinizing her from head to toe in an instant. The former fiancé maintained her composure, but Chloe caught a flash of irritation as Grace processed the presence of an unfamiliar young woman by Dylan's side. "Good evening, Grace," Dylan said, striving for a casual tone. "You remember Chloe?" Chloe offered a small smile and nodded politely. "Hi, nice to meet you." Grace gave a dry smile, quickly diverting her gaze. "Right. A pleasure, Chloe." Her tone, however, suggested the opposite. "I didn't know you'd be bringing company, Dylan." He shrugged, not wanting to escalate the situation. "Thought it'd be a good idea." Grace's smile tightened. "How convenient." Before they could respond, Dylan's boss appeared, shaking his hand firmly. The man, with a sharp suit and a stern demeanor framed by thin-rimmed glasses, cast a fleeting glance at Chloe but didn't linger on her. Instead, he focused on Dylan. "I hope you're enjoying yourself. Tonight is crucial. Important contacts are present. We need to present a united front, you understand?" Dylan nodded, suppressing discomfort. "Of course, sir. I understand." The boss moved on to greet others, and Grace gestured for Dylan and Chloe to follow her to the reserved table. Strategically placed with a view of an illuminated garden, the spot oozed sophistication. Fine glassware, floral arrangements, and impeccably placed cutlery. Chloe stayed close to Dylan, acutely aware of Grace's watchful eyes dissecting her every move. Conversations at the table revolved around business deals, numbers, and projects. Chloe listened quietly, trying not to disrupt the flow. Occasionally, Dylan whispered reassurances to her, asking if she was okay. "Everything's great," Chloe lied, not wanting to add to his worries. But inside, she felt out of place, as though walking on eggshells to maintain the brittle air of cordiality. As the evening wore on, Grace took every opportunity to dominate the conversation, laughing at the boss's jokes and dropping hints about her insider knowledge of the company's plans. Chloe noticed Dylan tense up whenever Grace made pointed comments about his past absence, implying it had been the reason their relationship failed. At one point, Chloe excused herself to visit the restroom, eager for a brief reprieve from the oppressive atmosphere. When she returned, she found Grace seated next to Dylan, leaning toward him with a familiar air. The boss watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Grace shifted slightly upon Chloe's return but couldn't resist a snide remark. "Hope you're enjoying the evening, Chloe. I imagine events like this aren't your usual scene, are they? The insinuation was unmistakable. Chloe felt heat rise to her cheeks but forced herself to stay composed. Not really, no. This isn't my usual environment. I thought so, Grace replied, pursing her lips condescendingly. Dylan noticed the tension and stepped in. Grace, what exactly are you implying? She gave a smug smile. Oh, nothing. Just curious about how Chloe's adjusting to formal settings. Some behaviors, after all, require refinement. Chloe clenched her fists under the table but maintained her posture. We all have our firsts, don't we? Grace's smile faltered, while a few of Dylan's colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. The evening unfolded with mounting tension, culminating in Grace's barbed comments and Dylan's ultimate decision to confront her and defend Chloe in front of everyone. As they left the restaurant under the cold December sky, the weight of the evening and its potential repercussions hung heavily over them. Chloe, despite her insecurities, felt a flicker of gratitude for Dylan's unwavering support. The day after the disastrous dinner, the atmosphere felt even heavier for Dylan. He spent most of the morning staring at his phone, seeing numerous missed calls and messages from his boss. Some were short and direct, while others revealed a growing fury over the way Dylan had stormed out of the restaurant the previous night. A few words were enough to make it clear that the lack of professionalism and the scene wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. Chloe, on the other hand, tried to remain discreet. She woke up first, went down to the hotel cafeteria for a simple breakfast, and returned to the room without making a sound. At the door, she heard Dylan's muffled voice on the phone. It sounded like a tense conversation. He spoke softly but with a firmness she hadn't seen before. Afraid of interrupting, Chloe lingered in the hallway for a moment, leaning against the wall and taking deep breaths. She still felt guilty about everything that had happened the night before. Perhaps she should have simply declined his invitation to dinner. That way, Dylan wouldn't have gotten into a fight with his boss, or worse, confronted Grace in public. Even though Chloe had been the target of disdainful looks and snide remarks, nothing seemed worse than knowing Dylan might lose his job and his promising future because of his impulsive decision to defend her. When the sound of his voice inside the room faded, she finally mustered the courage to knock lightly on the door. Dylan opened it with his phone still in hand, his expression worn. "Hi," Chloe said, trying to smile to ease the tension. "Everything okay?" He took a moment to answer, running his hand through his hair and looking more exhausted than ever. "I just got off the phone with my boss. He's not happy at all." She bit her lower lip, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I can imagine. I'm really sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen." Dylan shook his head, taking a few steps toward the window. The view from the second floor wasn't much, but he seemed to be searching for some solace there, trying to process his emotions. "Don't apologize. I don't regret taking you. The problem is, he's making demands." Chloe furrowed her brow. "What kind of demands?" "He wants me to fix the image I've presented. To him, I need to recommit to Grace, show personal stability, and prove I'm not a liability to the company." Dylan let out a bitter laugh. "As if my private life is a product they need to approve before signing deals." Her chest tightened. "So, he wants you to end whatever's happening with me, right?" Dylan didn't need to reply. His silence said it all. He stared at the traffic outside, though his gaze was unfocused. His boss's words echoed in his mind. "If you want to keep the contract, think carefully about the company you keep." "Would you mind telling me everything?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "I mean, exactly what he said?" Dylan turned to face her, rubbing the back of his neck as if under pressure. "He said that if I keep being involved with someone who doesn't fit the company's preferred image, I'll lose credibility. He thinks last night proved I can't separate my personal life from business, and Grace somehow is reinforcing that idea." The mention of Grace sent a chill down Chloe's spine. "She wants you back?" Dylan exhaled deeply. Apparently, yes. But not for love or anything like that. She made it clear her interest lies in maintaining the status she's always had. The boss knows that with Grace by my side, the company can maintain its power couple image. Organized lives, everything perfect, that kind of facade. The entire situation felt suffocating for Chloe. She began pacing the room, rubbing her hands together. She feared being a burden in Dylan's life. He had a future, connections, and a career to protect, while she struggled just to keep a roof over her head. If it weren't for her, would his relationship with his boss be better and the negotiations smoother? "I don't want you to sacrifice your career because of me," she said, turning to him with tearful eyes. "You've worked your whole life to get here. I can't be the reason you lose it all." He shook his head, stepping closer. "This isn't your fault. I'm the one who doesn't want to give in to his blackmail. But maybe it would be better if I stepped away so you can sort things out." Her voice cracked at the end. Dylan placed his hands on her shoulders, looking her in the eyes. "Look, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. The contract is huge. It could give me the financial independence to start my own business someday. But I can't stand the idea of pushing you away just to look clean and ready to reconcile with Grace." She held back tears, nodding slightly. "I don't want you to feel pressured. I just want you to do what's best for you." He lowered his head, still holding her shoulders. His boss's words rang in his ears, but so did Chloe's earlier sentiment. Don't give up on love or dignity. There was an internal conflict. Dylan felt torn between protecting what he'd built and staying true to himself, and to Chloe. "Let's go for a walk. I need to clear my head," Dylan said, releasing her gently. They went downstairs to the hotel lobby, where the central heater created a cozy atmosphere. Stepping outside would mean facing the cold, but that seemed like the least of their worries. They wanted to escape before their thoughts overwhelmed them further. However, just as they approached the revolving door, the glass handles swung open, and to their surprise, Grace walked in, dressed in a sophisticated coat. Every strand of her hair seemed meticulously styled, as if she were ready for a formal meeting. Grace's gaze immediately landed on Chloe, with a hint of disdain. Then she turned to Dylan, smiling with practiced confidence. "Well, I knew I'd find you here. We need to talk." Dylan's face hardened, but he remained composed. "Grace, what are you doing? You can't just show up like this." She shrugged, feigning ignorance of his discomfort. "I just came from a meeting with your boss. He asked me to talk to you. We want to resolve this issue without any more scandals." Chloe's heart raced. If she'd felt guilty before, she was now certain that Grace was there to apply pressure. "What kind of resolution are you looking for?" she blurted, unable to contain her curiosity. Grace, lifting her chin, gave Chloe a once-over as if she were invisible. "Well, Dylan and I need to get back on track. The boss believes there's still room for us, especially now that a major contract is on the line. This is no time for image crises." She said "us" so casually, as if Chloe wasn't standing right there. Dylan, irritated, crossed his arms. "Are you even listening to me? I'm not interested in getting back together with you." Grace made a mock pity face, as if she felt sorry for him. "Stop being so stubborn. You know very well that we're a power couple, admired by everyone, and that reflects positively at work. This whole thing with—" She cast a venomous smile toward Chloe. "This girl is just holding you back." Chloe felt a sharp pang in her chest. Being called "this girl" made it clear that Grace considered her insignificant, like an insect to be crushed. She wanted to retort, but held back as she saw Dylan take a deep breath. "Grace, that's enough. You have no idea how I feel. I'm not going to fake a perfect relationship just to please my boss or anyone else." Grace rolled her eyes, impatient. "Fine then. You prefer to lose the big contract, lose your position in the company, just to stay with a homeless girl? No offense, but that doesn't seem like a smart choice." Chloe swallowed hard, her face burning with shame and anger. She wanted to protest, but the words wouldn't come out. Dylan opened his mouth to respond, but Grace continued, looking directly at Chloe, Look, Chloe, this isn't personal, but Dylan has a brilliant career ahead of him. Don't you think it would be better to step aside and let him move on? The sense of humiliation was immediate. Chloe felt as if the ground beneath her feet had vanished. For a moment she thought Grace might be right. Was it selfish to stay by Dylan's side and watch his career fall apart? Dylan, however, stepped closer to Grace, his restrained anger clear. "Don't say that again. You have no right to tell her what she should or shouldn't do." Grace stepped back slightly but maintained her haughty demeanor. "I'm just trying to help you, Dylan. I can erase this incident and help you shine again. You still want to negotiate with important investors, don't you? So tell me, is she worth losing everything for?" Chloe couldn't bear to hear more. Tears welled up, and a lump formed in her throat. She approached Dylan, touching his arm. "I'm going to the room. Let you two talk alone." "No, Chloe, stay here," Dylan said, noticing she was on the verge of breaking down. Grace, however, smiled triumphantly at Chloe's shaken reaction. "Let her go. She got the message." For a few seconds, Chloe hesitated but chose to walk away. She feared hearing more insults or witnessing a conversation that would end in ultimatums. Avoiding Dylan's gaze, she hurried toward the elevator, her heart pounding and tears threatening to spill. That encounter made her feel even smaller than before. Meanwhile, Dylan stood frozen, watching Chloe disappear toward the rooms. He was ready to argue further with Grace but felt weak and confused. On one hand, he didn't want to lose what he'd built professionally. On the other, he couldn't stand the thought of abandoning Chloe, someone who, in such a short time, had awakened feelings in him that Grace never had. "This is absurd, Grace," Dylan said, his voice trembling. "You can't dictate my life." She rolled her eyes. "I'm just repeating what your boss said. If you want to protect your career, do as he asked. It's simple." Dylan stayed silent, but rage and fear simmered within him. He wanted to tell Grace to disappear, to never show up again. Yet, the words remained stuck. He feared the consequences of such a radical move. Grace, sensing his hesitation, decided to leave with an air of triumph. She turned around, casting a quick glance toward the elevators. Before exiting, she left one final cutting remark. "Think carefully, Dylan. You know me. I don't make empty threats." As soon as Grace exited through the revolving door, Dylan exhaled heavily, sinking into the nearest chair. Someone from the reception desk glanced at him curiously, but he didn't care. His head throbbed, and a sharp pain in his chest marked the anguish that conversation had caused. It was clear that Grace and his boss were on the same team, a pair willing to do anything to preserve appearances and profits. As much as he hated to admit it, the rational part of Dylan understood that the contract could change his financial life. With the commission and the prestige it brought, he'd have the freedom to invest in his own projects. He wouldn't need to follow his boss's orders or Grace's influence anymore. He'd be his own boss, perhaps even able to help Chloe start anew. On the other hand, staying with Chloe now risked everything collapsing before it could happen. In his heart, he knew what he truly wanted, but the external pressures seemed colossal, impossible to ignore. As he thought this over, a pang of regret hit him as he realized the weight Chloe carried from every insult she heard, every look of disdain she received. If she stayed with him, she would become the target of even more attacks. Getting up, still dazed by it all, Dylan slowly walked to the reception desk, as if he could ask for help from someone there, but there was no one who could solve his problem. The distant sound of a cleaning cart and a few low conversations from guests filled the air. Life in the hotel went on, indifferent to his personal drama. With the key to the room still in his pocket, he decided to go upstairs. But then he thought of Chloe, of how she'd rushed to the elevator, likely hurt and feeling guilty. That thought pained him. He wanted to find her and tell her none of it was her fault, but he didn't know if she was ready to hear it. Perhaps it was best to give her some space to process everything, to calm her heart and reflect as well. Dylan lingered in the lobby for a moment, staring at the ceiling and taking deep breaths to avoid succumbing to despair. He felt like he was in a deadlock. Maintain his integrity and stay with Chloe, risking the loss of a lucrative deal, or give in to blackmail, return to Grace, and live a life of appearances. Neither option was easy. Feeling powerless, he took a few steps toward the elevator, stopping midway. His gaze was confused, vacant, unsure of what to do next. He thought, I need to talk to Chloe. I need to tell her I won't abandon her. But at the same time, Grace's scathing words echoed in his mind. This isn't the time for image crises. Leave this girl behind. He pressed the elevator button but hesitated before stepping in. Perhaps giving Chloe some time would be wiser. He himself needed to think. His conscience weighed like a concrete block. When the elevator door opened, he saw no one inside. The interior was empty, waiting for a passenger. He inhaled and exhaled slowly, summoning the courage to step in. He needed to at least try talking to Chloe, apologizing and saying he wasn't ready to give up on her. Finally, he entered the elevator and pressed the button. As it ascended, his heart pounded harder with each passing floor, knowing that this conversation would be crucial to their future. A part of him feared Chloe might decide to leave for good, thinking it was the only way to avoid further harm. When the door opened on her floor with a soft click, the hallway was quiet, illuminated by warm yellow lights. Dylan walked slowly toward her room, where the door was closed. He raised his hand to knock but heard something from inside. Not clear words, but the muffled sound of crying that struck him like a blow to the chest. For a moment, he stood frozen, hand raised. He wanted to go in, to hug her, to say they'd figure this out together, but he feared that his presence might only bring her more pain. After a few seconds of hesitation, he let his hand fall. Maybe it was better to give her the space she needed. Slowly, Dylan turned around and walked back toward the elevator, his head hanging low. Each step felt like a hammer pounding his conscience, repeating the question, "Will you give up the contract or Chloe?" He didn't have an answer. Back in the lobby, the same scene greeted him. A few people passing by, random conversations, the world moving on while his life felt stuck. Dylan stood there, unsure whether to go back upstairs or step outside for air. It was then that he heard a faint noise behind him. When he turned, he saw Chloe exiting the elevator with tear-streaked cheeks, hurrying toward the stairs leading to the higher floors. He called her name, but Chloe didn't look back. Her hurried steps suggested she just wanted to hide. Dylan walked to the base of the staircase, calling her again. "Chloe, wait!" But she didn't stop. She climbed with a sad expression, her eyes fixed, fresh tears forming. Her rigid yet shaken demeanor showed she couldn't handle more conflict, blackmail, or malicious remarks. Chloe climbed back to her room without saying a word. Dylan stayed in the lobby, realizing he might lose everything, the contract, and Chloe. Chloe spent the rest of the day in her room, secluded, trying to calm her mind, which was buzzing with doubts and insecurities. Sleep was hard to come by, and her dreams were confusing, always marked by the figures of Grace and Dylan's boss, speaking of her as if she were a burden. The next morning she woke up early but spent too much time staring at the ceiling, thinking about how she could resolve the situation without jeopardizing Dylan. She couldn't find any satisfying answers. Meanwhile, in the hotel corridor, Dylan hesitated in front of Chloe's door. He held a small bag with fresh bread and coffee for her. He wanted to knock, invite her to talk, but he wasn't sure if she'd welcome him. After a long moment, he summoned his courage and knocked gently. "Chloe, it's Dylan. Can you open the door?" Inside, she got up slowly, glanced at her reflection in the mirror, and saw a tired face, her eyes slightly swollen. She opened the door, stepping back to avoid looking at him directly. Dylan noticed her guarded demeanor but extended the bag toward her. "I brought you some breakfast." She took the bag with a timid smile, whispering her thanks. They stood in silence for a few seconds, unsure how to start a conversation. Eventually, Chloe relented and invited him in. He stepped inside and sat on one of the chairs in the room. "Did you sleep well?" Dylan ventured. "I tried, but it was hard. My mind just wouldn't stop," Chloe replied, sitting on the edge of the bed and placing the bag beside her. "And you? How are you?" He sighed in frustration. "I got more messages from my boss. He's setting up another meeting, kind of an informal dinner to discuss reviving the negotiations. He wants me to go, with Grace, of course." Chloe looked away, wringing her hands in her lap. "I think you should go. It's important, right?" "It's not that simple. You know what he really wants," Dylan said, gesturing vaguely. "He wants me away from you, getting back with Grace." She closed her eyes, recalling everything that had happened. "That's why I think it's better if I step aside. I can't be the reason you lose such a big contract." He shook his head, standing from the chair to face her. "That wouldn't be fair. I don't want to push you away, Chloe. It would be a sacrifice I couldn't live with." She stood up, instinctively beginning to pack the few belongings she had: a toothbrush, some changes of clothes, and a new coat he'd bought for her. "Maybe it's best for both of us. You can sort things out with your boss. You don't have to pretend to love Grace, but if you show them you're single for a while, maybe they'll give you some leeway." Dylan felt his throat tighten, recognizing the pain that idea caused him. It felt like someone he'd come to deeply care for was slipping away. "I'm not sure it'll work like that, but I also don't know what else to do." Chloe took a deep breath, turning to him. "I understand. I know how important this contract is to you. I won't hold you back or ask you to risk everything." He looked at her, realizing she meant it. "You're not holding me back, Chloe. I'm in this situation because of the choices I made, dedicating myself too much to work and putting my personal life second for so long." She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her weariness. "I just don't want to ruin your chances of starting over right." Dylan was about to respond but stopped when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw his boss's name on the screen. He glanced at Chloe, who looked even more tense, and decided to silence the call. The phone buzzed a few more times, persistent, but he didn't answer. "He's not going to stop until I give him an answer," Dylan murmured, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Chloe nodded, picking up the breakfast bag to distract herself from her nerves. "Look, why don't you go talk to him directly? Find out exactly what he wants. I'm not saying you should do everything he asks, but try to negotiate something that doesn't force you to sacrifice your entire life." "And if there's no deal?" Dylan asked, his tone almost defeated. Chloe shrugged, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Then you'll have to choose what matters most." He felt his chest tighten but nodded. He needed to act instead of hiding. He took a step forward as if to embrace her, but Chloe stepped back, fearing it would make everything more painful. In an attempt to soften the moment, she spoke gently. "It's okay. I'll stay here and think about my next steps too. If you decide it's not worth fighting your boss, I'll understand." Dylan studied her, seeing the mix of sadness and resolve on her face. A part of him wanted to insist, to beg her not to leave, but he couldn't find the words to convince her that everything would work out. With a restrained nod, Dylan left the room. He descended the stairs quickly, almost tripping on the last step. He needed to find his boss, and maybe Grace, to settle everything once and for all. The cold winter air outside hit his face, a stark reminder that Christmas was drawing near. The holiday magic that once brought hope now felt like a distant memory. He tried calling his boss, but the call was interrupted by an automated message. Sighing, he pocketed his phone. Perhaps it was better to go straight to the office and take his chances finding him there. He hailed a cab at the corner and headed toward the building where he'd spent countless hours chasing goals, deadlines, and approvals. Upon arrival, he rode the glass elevator, watching the cityscape below. A knot formed in his stomach as he realized this conversation might define his entire professional future. When the doors opened, he was met by his boss's secretary, who looked up from her computer with a polite smile. "Hello, Dylan. He's been expecting you. Go right in." Muttering a quick "thank you," Dylan stepped into the office. His boss sat in a leather chair reviewing papers. He seemed focused, but as Dylan entered, he glanced up with a serious expression tinged with impatience. "Finally decided to show up. I thought you might not come today," the boss remarked, setting his pen down. "Take a seat." Dylan obeyed, his legs feeling unsteady. He remained silent, waiting for his boss to begin. It didn't take long. "Look, we've got a problem. That dinner was a disaster, and you know it. I heard about the scene at the end, leaving with that girl in such a dramatic way, making everyone uncomfortable. It didn't reflect well on the company or our clients." Dylan began to explain, but his boss raised a hand to cut him off. "I'm not here for excuses. I'm here to tell you we need to fix this today. The partnership with PJ Investments is on the line. They need assurances that you're reliable, someone who delivers on promises and stays fully focused on business." "And what exactly do you want me to do?" Dylan asked, his voice slightly shaky. His boss leaned forward. "You know what needs to be done. You need to re-establish a professional image and, frankly, reassess your personal choices. This relationship with someone, how should I put it, without social standing doesn't sit well with our investors. Grace has made it clear she's willing to move past the past and reconcile as long as everything remains discreet and convenient." Dylan's eyes widened at the bluntness, almost cruel in its delivery. His boss continued, "If you do this, you'll regain our trust and have the backing to close the biggest deal of your career, one that could earn you a multi-million-dollar bonus. If not, well, I can't keep someone who doesn't align with the company's image. Do you understand?" Swallowing hard, Dylan thought of Chloe's face, the way she tried to stay strong despite the odds stacked against her. I can't fake a relationship just to appease you. You don't have to fake anything, Dylan. You just need to decide what you want for your life. Do you want to keep moving up, or do you prefer to walk away?" His boss leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the armrest. "And before you answer, think about how long it took to build this career. Think about the years we've invested in you." His words felt like arrows piercing Dylan's resolve. His mind raced with anger and anguish, unsure whether to shout or walk away. "If you need time to think, fine, but I won't wait long. I need an answer for PJ Investments by tomorrow. Decide if you're part of the team or not." With that, his boss picked up his pen and returned to his paperwork, as if the matter were settled. Dylan sat frozen for a moment, searching for something, anything to say, but nothing came. Slowly, he rose, left the office, and closed the door behind him. In the outer office, the secretary glanced at him with curiosity, but he shook his head and walked toward the elevator. When he finally reached the street, December's chill felt sharper than ever. Dylan wandered aimlessly for blocks, lost in thought. He remembered Grace's suggestion for a second meeting to clear things up. The very idea of seeing her again made his stomach turn, but it might be his only chance to prevent everything from falling apart. After walking without direction, he hailed a cab and returned to the hotel. On the way, his phone buzzed with a message from Grace. "I hope you spoke to him. I'm waiting for your call to confirm how we'll present ourselves tomorrow." Dylan let out a bitter sigh, thinking of Chloe. Was she packing her bags to leave for good? The thought tightened his throat. When he arrived, he paid the driver and stepped into the hotel. In the lobby, an unwelcome sight greeted him. Grace was there, chatting with the manager. When she noticed Dylan, she flashed a smile he recognized as fake. "Dylan, darling, I knew you'd come. We need to talk." He looked around, embarrassed. "Are you following me now?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. I just thought since you went to see your boss, we could plan how to handle the situation." He rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. He needed time to think, but Grace wouldn't give him any space. The hotel manager excused himself, leaving them alone. "I don't have anything to plan with you," Dylan muttered, though without much conviction. Grace laughed lightly. "Classic you, but as far as I know, the deal is at stake, and if you don't act as expected, your boss will drop you." Dylan closed his eyes, shaking his head. That harsh reality loomed over him. Without another word, he pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling. He wanted to call Chloe, text her, anything to say, "Please don't leave." But he couldn't bring himself to do it in front of Grace. "Let's talk in the hotel bar, okay?" Grace suggested, motioning to a side door. "I don't want to stay here in the lobby where everyone's watching." He hesitated but eventually followed her. The bar was small and empty at that hour. They sat at a corner table away from the counter. Grace ordered a juice. Dylan, nothing. His stomach was too tied up in knots for anything. "So what's your decision?" she asked, tapping her red-painted nails on the table's edge. "Will you win back the investors' trust or keep playing at a teenage romance?" Dylan felt the urge to get up and walk away, but he was frozen in place. That question tormented him, and the answer seemed anything but simple. His heart racing, he picked up his phone and, without thinking, dialed his boss's number, seeking some kind of assurance or preparing to call it quits for good. Grace watched, confident he would cave. The phone rang a few times before his boss's harsh voice answered. Dylan took a deep breath, ready to say something that would change everything, whether to play the dirty game or resign on the spot. As Dylan hung up, his heart pounded. He knew that tomorrow he would have to make his final choice, follow his boss's rules or stay free to love. The next day, Dylan barely got any sleep. He spent the night rereading the messages exchanged with his boss and with Grace, none of which offered any sign of a truce. The ultimatum had been clear. If he didn't accept the conditions to maintain a flawless image, the deal would fall apart. Worse, he would lose both his job and his reputation. Despite having turned off his phone the day before, he knew he couldn't keep running away. He had to confront his boss and put an end to this story, one way or another. He got up before dawn, took a quick shower, and dressed in business attire, though his confidence was severely shaken. Outside, the biting morning wind stung his face, but the discomfort was nothing compared to the knot in his stomach. The taxi dropped him off in front of the same imposing building he had entered so many times with his head held high. This time, however, everything seemed darker, as though an invisible weight rested on every step. When he reached his boss's floor, he noticed the tense atmosphere. The secretary who used to greet him warmly now addressed him formally, almost coldly. He stared at her in silence for a few moments before asking if the boss was available. She simply nodded, signaling for him to go in. Dylan took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and stepped inside, finding the man sitting behind the desk with a far sterner expression than usual. "Good morning, Dylan," the boss began, without a hint of warmth. "It's good you came. We need a final answer." Dylan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. I'm here to clarify everything." The boss leaned back in his chair. "Then clarify. Are you going to stay with us and follow the guidelines we've given, or do you prefer to go your own way?" Before Dylan could respond, the door burst open, revealing Grace. She walked in with determined strides, as if she owned the place, carrying a folder of documents and a controlled smile. The startled secretary appeared behind her, apologizing for not announcing the visitor. The boss waved her off dismissively, and Grace approached. "Good morning," she said, giving Dylan a pointed look. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought it would be better if we were all together for this conversation." Dylan felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't part of the plan. He looked from his boss to Grace, realizing they had set a trap. She placed the folder on the desk, opening it with deliberate precision as the boss observed with silent approval. "It seems we don't have a definitive decision yet," Grace added, turning to Dylan. "So I'll help make things clear." She pulled out some printed pages and began presenting them like a slideshow. Dylan recognized one of them, a photo of Chloe sitting on the sidewalk, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Others showed Chloe in front of the hotel, wearing her simple clothes, and even a candid shot of Dylan and Chloe entering the hotel room they were staying in. It all felt invasive, as though they had hired someone to follow them. "What is this?" Dylan demanded, outraged. Grace gave a cold smile. Evidence that your companion doesn't meet the standards expected of you. If we want to manage this scandal, we'll need to make some agreements. Or these images might find their way out there, and I don't think the investors will be pleased. The boss shook his head disapprovingly, like a teacher reprimanding a student for a grave mistake. I've been saying for a while that we can't let your personal life jeopardize the business. If these photos hit the media, they'll question your judgment, your choices, and it will tarnish the company's reputation. Dylan clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. He couldn't believe they were using Chloe's struggles as ammunition to destroy her and blackmail him. "You've gone too far," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Grace shrugged, sliding the pages back into the folder. "It's nothing personal, but we also can't let you sink the company. You know, Dylan, I was willing to forget the past and rekindle our relationship. I'm here to help, but I need an answer. Are you going to stay with a homeless girl and risk everything, or are you going to do the right thing for your future?" His heart pounded in his chest, as if it wanted to leap out. He thought of Chloe, how she tried so hard not to burden him, how she was willing to give up everything for him. He felt guilty. He knew this blackmail was low, but he also knew that fighting back would likely cost him his job, financial stability, and the respect he had built in his career. "And what if I don't accept either option?" he challenged, though unsure if he had the strength to back it up. The boss exchanged a glance with Grace before turning back to Dylan. "Then I'm afraid there's no place for you here anymore. We'll have to find someone else to handle the negotiations with PJ Investments. It's your decision." Dylan's body trembled. He recalled the sleepless nights, the effort and dedication he had poured into the company over the years. Now it could all unravel in a matter of minutes. He looked out the window, searching for a shred of courage or a way out that didn't involve sacrificing his dignity. "I won't pretend to be someone I'm not," he finally declared, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I don't want Grace, and I won't abandon Chloe just so you can pretend my life is perfect." For a moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioner. Grace raised her eyebrows, surprised by his response. The boss tapped his fingers on the desk, as if he had anticipated this outcome. "In that case, I need you to sign these termination papers immediately." He pulled out another folder from his desk. "Everything is formalized here. The company cannot keep an employee who doesn't adhere to the required image and conduct standards." Dylan's eyes widened as his hands grew clammy. He took the pen the boss handed him, realizing there was no turning back. He leaned forward and signed the papers, feeling dazed. Grace stood by, showing no pity or solidarity, merely watching as if witnessing the inevitable conclusion of a story. "That's it then," the boss said, collecting the papers. "You need to gather your belongings and leave the building. Your access to the company system will be revoked. I ask that you maintain discretion about this matter with the media, as we may take legal action if there's any defamation." Dylan felt breathless, but didn't back down. It was done. Summoning all the courage he had, he cast one last look at Grace, who was already fiddling with her phone with a slight smile, and left the office. The secretary, visibly uncomfortable, watched him pass without saying a word. It took him only a few minutes to empty the drawer in his adjacent office, collecting photos, pens, and memories of years of work. Anyone watching might have noticed his tense face and heavy steps, but they wouldn't have guessed the storm of emotions within. Back in the corridor, he was startled to see Chloe at the far end, arms crossed over her chest. She had faced her fear and decided to follow him to the company. She couldn't bear the thought of Dylan facing everything alone. He stopped, still holding the box with his meager belongings. "Chloe," he whispered out of breath, "you shouldn't have come." She glanced around, noticing the curious stares from employees, then looked at him with tenderness and concern. "I couldn't just wait at the hotel. I came to support you, but it's too late now, isn't it?" Dylan set the box down for a moment and approached her, confirming with a nod. "They fired me. They used all those photos, all that evidence to pressure me, and I decided I wouldn't give in. Chloe bit her lip, the weight of guilt settling on her. I'm so sorry. If it weren't for me, you'd still have your job. He shook his head, locking eyes with her tearful gaze. Don't say that. It was my decision. I couldn't live with myself selling out like that. At that moment, the office door opened, revealing Grace and the boss following behind, likely to ensure Dylan left the premises. Both directed disdainful looks at Chloe. Grace didn't miss the opportunity to jab. So this is the ending you chose, Dylan? A resignation in front of everyone, accompanied by a girl who's only dragging you down. Chloe felt the words like knives, but Dylan gripped her hand and replied firmly, I'd rather be with someone who genuinely cares about me than with people who see me as a puppet. The boss, impatient, signaled for the security guards to step forward. Everything is settled. Please escort the former employee out. We don't want any trouble. Two tall men in discreet uniforms advanced, one on either side, ready to guide Dylan and Chloe to the exit. Dylan picked up the box of belongings, took a deep breath, and intertwined his fingers with Chloe's trembling ones. They walked down the corridor in silence, followed by curious stares and unspoken commentary. With each step, he felt a mixture of relief and pain. Relief for not succumbing to blackmail, pain for losing an important part of his professional life. They descended in the elevator while the secretary kept her eyes lowered. Upon reaching the ground floor, they crossed the lobby where elegantly dressed people moved about. Through the glass doors, they saw the street bathed in sunlight. The winter wind hit them as soon as they stepped outside, reminding them that reality awaited, without red carpets or mercy. Dylan held the box close to his chest, and Chloe, beside him, never let go of his hand. They looked back just once, seeing the building's reflection in the glass, the place where so many disappointments and tough decisions had unfolded. Dylan felt strangely hollow, as though he needed to reorganize everything he was. Yet, looking at Chloe, he found some solace. At least this was a choice he had made from the heart. And so, Dylan and Chloe left the building, dazed, jobless, and with their reputations in tatters. Christmas, which was supposed to bring hope, now seemed further away than ever. Dylan and Chloe walked away from the building with hesitant steps, the cold street breeze hitting their faces like a cruel reminder that there was no turning back. The city continued its frenetic rhythm, indifferent to their drama. The glow of Christmas lights strung across lampposts and storefronts now seemed like a painful contrast to the emptiness they felt inside. They looked at each other, uncertain about where to go. They had lost almost everything that had once given them a semblance of security. Dylan's job, the reputation he had spent years building, and even the faint hope that everything would resolve without major fallout. Chloe pulled her coat tighter around her, trying to shield herself from the cold and hide the trembling of her hands, which betrayed her anxiety. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice fragile. Dylan glanced around, feeling the box with his few belongings grow heavier with each passing second. "I have no idea, but we can't just stand in the middle of the street. Let's head back to the hotel, at least for tonight." She nodded in silent agreement. Neither had the strength to argue or propose a better plan. They hailed a taxi at the curb, and the driver, noticing their somber demeanor, asked no questions. During the ride, Chloe watched the urban landscape pass by through the window, as if searching for a spark of inspiration for the future. When they arrived at the hotel, the receptionist greeted them with a polite smile, though her expression betrayed a hint of concern. Perhaps she noticed Dylan's weary face and Chloe's tired demeanor. They went straight up to their room without exchanging words. Inside, Chloe hung up her coat and arranged her few belongings in the corner, while Dylan placed the box on the bed. "I'm so sorry for everything," she said softly, almost in a whisper, playing with a strand of her hair, her expression contrite. "I know I've said it a few times already, but I can't help it. It wasn't your fault," Dylan insisted, his gaze fixed on the window. You were by my side, but it was my choices that brought us here." She approached him, lightly resting her hand on his arm. "Even so, if I hadn't come into your life, maybe—" He turned to her, gently holding her hands. "Maybe I would have stayed miserable and complacent, not realizing I didn't want that lifestyle anymore. You helped me see there are other possibilities." Chloe gave a small smile, though she still looked worried. They stayed in that position for a few moments, feeling each other's breathing, until Dylan stepped away and sat on the edge of the bed. "I need to figure out a new path," he confessed. "I worked at that company for years, but now it's all gone. And honestly, maybe it's an opportunity to start something different, without so many constraints." She pulled up a chair and sat facing him, crossing her legs. "Do you have any idea what you'd like to do?" He sighed, deep in thought. "I've thought about starting my own business, something that wouldn't force me to sacrifice my personal life for impossible targets. But it's a dream I never took seriously because I was so focused on climbing the corporate ladder." Chloe's eyes lit up with curiosity. "What kind of business?" "Consulting, maybe. I have experience in negotiation, management, dealing with major clients. But I need capital, a plan, someone to believe in me." She nodded, her energy lifting a little. "Isn't there anyone you know? A former professor? A smaller investor? Anyone who might take a chance on your skills?" Dylan remained silent for a moment, searching his memory. "Well, there's an old mentor who helped me early in my career. He always encouraged me not to get stuck in corporate molds. I think we're still in touch via email." Chloe gave a timid smile. "Why not send him a message? It doesn't hurt to try. The worst he can say is no, right?" He agreed, standing to retrieve his laptop from the box of belongings. He sat at the small desk in the corner, plugged it in, and as he waited for the system to boot up, he felt a faint glimmer of hope. Chloe watched him from across the room, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, silently rooting for something positive to come of it. "While you do that, I'll see if I can grab us a snack. I don't know about you, but I'm starving," she said, getting up. Dylan nodded, smiling gratefully, then turned his focus back to the computer. It felt odd to write an email with his mind racing, but he tried to keep it concise. He greeted the mentor, explained his departure from the company, and shared that he was seeking new opportunities. He detailed his skills, experience, and his desire to start a consultancy focused on small to medium-sized clients, free of toxic corporate pressures. He asked for the mentor's opinion, unsure if he would receive a prompt response. A few minutes later, Chloe returned with 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper and 2 cans of soda she had gotten from the hotel's restaurant. Dylan thanked her, accepting one of the sandwiches and taking a distracted bite as he kept glancing at the laptop screen. "Did you send the email?" she asked, curious. "I did. Now we wait to see if he reads it and replies. I have no idea if he still uses the same email or if it's active." Chloe unwrapped her sandwich, savoring the simple but comforting aroma of toasted bread. "Even if he doesn't reply, we can always try other people. Maybe your college friends?" Dylan took a sip of soda, pondering. "Maybe. Though most of them are stuck in routines similar to my old one, working for big corporations." She shrugged. "You never know who might be interested in doing things differently." He paused mid-bite, looking at Chloe with curiosity. "You surprise me. You could be blaming me, arguing with me for losing everything, but here you are, brainstorming solutions and cheering me on." Chloe lowered her gaze, slightly embarrassed. "I just want to see you happy. You've done so much for me, even though we met under tough circumstances." Dylan chuckled softly, recalling how they had first met on a cold Christmas night. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start," he said, determined, finishing his sandwich. "I don't want to spend my days lamenting something that didn't even make me happy." Chloe nodded silently, finishing her meal. The rest of the day passed quietly. They went for a brief walk in the afternoon, trying to clear their minds. The hotel wasn't the most comfortable place, but at least they had a roof over their heads, Dylan knew that without a steady job, their money wouldn't last forever, so he needed a plan soon. Chloe noticed his concern and felt a sense of responsibility to help him rebuild. When night fell, they returned to the room. Dylan checked his emails one last time before bed. Still no response. The wind howled outside, accompanied by a light rain tapping against the windows. They spent the evening discussing how to pitch a consulting idea. Chloe took the initiative to look up business pitch examples online, gathering ideas from people who had started small businesses with limited resources. They sketched out plans to target local clients, offering services like sales process improvements and supplier negotiations. Dylan loved Chloe's practicality. She understood the struggles of those with tight budgets, and her perspective complemented his corporate background. "If we can land just one initial client, it might be the push we need," Dylan said, feeling encouraged. Around 11 p.m., they decided to call it a night. As Chloe went to brush her teeth, Dylan checked his emails one last time. To his surprise, there was a new unread message. His heart raced as he opened it, realizing it was from his mentor. The email began warmly, with the mentor recalling Dylan's dedication during their time working together. He mentioned hearing some rumors about Dylan's departure but refrained from passing judgment. The email ended with an invitation to meet the next afternoon to discuss a project that might align with Dylan's dream of starting his own business. Chloe returned from the bathroom and noticed the smile spreading across Dylan's face. "Good news?" He turned the laptop toward her, showing her the email. It was short but full of promise. Chloe read it and looked up at Dylan, sharing his excitement. On the screen, the final words of the mentor's message read, "Let's meet tomorrow. I have a proposal that could change everything." Dylan and Chloe woke up to the first rays of morning light streaming through the cracks in the hotel room curtains. The night had been restless, not just because of their worries about the future, but also due to the anticipation surrounding the mentor's response. Still, there was an air of cautious optimism. Chloe was the first to rise, peeking out the window to see the city slowly waking, its streets glowing faintly with Christmas decorations that seemed to shine even in daylight. She turned back to Dylan, who was stretching lazily on the bed, eyes opening gradually. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, tilting her head with a subtle smile. "The best few hours I've had in days," he admitted, though the upcoming meeting with his mentor still made his heart race. Chloe slipped on her coat and shoes at a leisurely pace, attempting to project confidence, though inside she felt a twinge of worry. She hadn't known Dylan for long, but it was enough to make her wish things would finally work out for him. Somehow, she felt a part of his rebuilding process. After a quick breakfast in the hotel's dining area, they hailed a taxi to the address the mentor had provided. The location was an office in a modest building, a stark contrast to the luxurious skyscrapers where Dylan had worked before. The driver pulled up in front of a 5-story brick building with old windows. A sign at the entrance read, "Innovation and Co-working Space." "Is this it?" Chloe asked, her curiosity piqued as she studied the unassuming yet welcoming facade. Dylan nodded, a flurry of nerves in his stomach. They stepped through the glass doors and were greeted by a friendly receptionist who directed them down a side corridor to a small meeting room. Dylan recognized the mentor immediately, a gray-haired man with an open smile who looked more like a university professor than a corporate executive. "Dylan, it's been ages!" the mentor exclaimed, standing to shake hands. "And you must be Chloe, right?" Chloe nodded, surprised he knew her name. Dylan must have mentioned her in his email, and it seemed the mentor had remembered every detail. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, sensing the positive energy in the room. The meeting room was modest, scattered tables, a coffee machine in the corner, and colorful framed prints on the walls. At the back, a whiteboard was filled with scribbles about projects and deadlines. The mentor pulled out chairs for them to sit and offered coffee, which they both accepted to ease the tension. "I'm glad you reached out," the mentor began, his eyes fixed on Dylan with genuine warmth. I heard rumors about your departure from the company and figured it was only a matter of time before you sought an independent path. Dylan gave a cautious smile. It happened suddenly, but maybe it's the opportunity I needed. Exactly. The mentor gestured to some folders on the table. I'm working with a group of local investors, people who don't have much capital but are eager to make an impact. They're looking for someone with experience in management and negotiation to help them grow. I think you'd be a perfect fit. Chloe felt a surge of hope, but kept quiet, letting Dylan have his moment. He opened one of the folders, flipping through documents and spreadsheets with an expert eye. With each page, his expression grew more intrigued. This isn't as grand as the deals I used to manage, he observed, looking up at the mentor. But it has enormous growth potential. And if I'm understanding correctly, they value a more human approach, right? The mentor nodded with a smile. Exactly. The idea is to help small and medium-sized businesses develop without falling into the corporate traps you know all too well. It's a more collaborative model. If successful, it could expand into other sectors. Dylan glanced at Chloe, who smiled in approval. It's like what we talked about, accessible and ethical consulting, she murmured enthusiastically. The mentor raised an eyebrow, intrigued. So you've already brainstormed some ideas. Excellent. If you're ready, I can introduce you to the investors today. They appreciate initiative. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and Chloe began to feel genuinely excited. They ended up sharing some preliminary ideas, with Chloe drawing from her experiences to highlight the real needs of small business owners and informal workers. The mentor, pleasantly surprised, started directing questions her way, eager to hear her unique perspective. You seem incredibly resourceful, Chloe, he remarked with a satisfied grin. Your insights could be invaluable in reaching clients hesitant about traditional consulting firms. She blushed, unaccustomed to such praise. Dylan placed a hand over hers, a gesture of solidarity. So, are we in? The mentor asked, glancing between Dylan and Chloe. Absolutely, Dylan replied, exhaling as if finally able to breathe. What's the next step? We'll iron out the details as we go. For now, let's schedule a formal meeting with the investors in 2 days. In the meantime, work on an initial proposal. The rest of the afternoon was spent brainstorming and planning. Chloe found herself speaking openly in what initially seemed like an intimidating professional setting. The mentor listened attentively, jotting down notes in a small notebook. Dylan, energized, felt more optimistic than he had in a long time. There were no tyrannical bosses or reputational threats, just the chance to create something meaningful with people who believed in his potential. By the time the meeting ended, it was well past lunch. The mentor bid them goodbye, promising to meet again in 2 days. Dylan and Chloe stepped outside, trying to process the whirlwind of hope they now felt. This feels like a dream, Chloe said, gazing up at the clouds. Do you realize how much this could change our lives? I do. It's like a fresh start, the right kind of start, Dylan said, taking her hand and smiling. Thank you for believing in me. She squeezed his hand in return. And thank you for letting me be part of it. They grabbed a simple meal at a corner cafe, laughing at how little they missed the extravagant dinners of their past lives. Everything felt lighter, as though their old burdens were fading away. Unbeknownst to them, however, Grace was still monitoring Dylan. Unable to accept that he might rebuild his life without crawling back to the company, she had begun plotting with his former boss to sabotage his new venture. For now, Dylan and Chloe remained blissfully unaware of the shadow looming over their newfound hope. Instead, they spent the evening sketching out budgets and brainstorming names for the consulting firm. At a newsstand, Chloe picked up an entrepreneurship magazine for inspiration, while Dylan leafed through success stories of people starting from scratch. It bolstered his resolve even more. But as they neared the hotel, Dylan's phone rang, displaying an unknown number. He hesitated before answering, expecting it to be from the co-working space or a potential client. Instead, there was silence on the other end, followed by a distorted voice whispering something unintelligible before the line went dead. "That was strange," he muttered, frowning. "Probably just a wrong number." Chloe shrugged but couldn't shake a faint unease. Something about the call felt off, like a warning. Still, they brushed it aside and returned to their room, eager to continue planning. As night fell, Dylan's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from the same unknown number. The message was short, yet its ominous tone sent a chill through him. "The truth will come out. Prepare for the Christmas event tomorrow." The next morning, Dylan and Chloe woke up agitated, recalling the cryptic message received the night before. "The truth will come to light. Prepare for the Christmas event tomorrow." The day had arrived, and they were unsure of what to expect. However, there was an important commitment to fulfill: the Christmas event where Dylan would present his new project, the result of conversations with his mentor and local small-scale investors. Dylan woke first, gazing out the hotel room window. Outside, snow piled up on the sidewalks, shimmering under the light of street lamps still lit. It was Christmas Eve, and the entire city seemed wrapped in a festive aura. Despite the beautiful scenery, Dylan's heart pounded anxiously. He checked his phone, but there were no new messages or calls. On one hand, he felt relieved. On the other, he remained nervous about the veiled threat received. "Good morning," Chloe murmured, stepping out of the bathroom with a sleepy look. "You seem worried." "I am," Dylan confessed, "but I can't let fear paralyze us. Today is the day we talk about the project at the co-working space. And, whatever Grace or my ex-boss are planning, we won't back down." Chloe nodded in agreement, trying to lighten the mood. "And you know what? It doesn't matter what they do to try to disrupt us. We'll show them who we are and what we're worth." She felt the same unease but made an effort to exude confidence. In recent nights, she had worked tirelessly alongside Dylan, organizing slides and arguments for the presentation. Despite her lack of formal experience in this world, she believed that sincerity would resonate with those seeking a more human way of doing business. After getting ready, they headed to the event venue. The streets were congested due to Christmas festivities. They were lined with lights, inflatable Santa Claus figures, and children dashing about with red hats. It was a magical, almost surreal scene given the tension they both felt. Upon arrival, they found the hall decorated with lit-up Christmas trees, wreaths, and instrumental music playing in the background, creating a welcoming atmosphere. Dylan's mentor greeted them with a warm smile, indicating that several important attendees were already present, waiting for the presentation. Pleased, the mentor pulled Dylan and Chloe aside to a more private corner. "I'm glad you came early. The people I told you about, the potential investors, are here. They're curious to hear your ideas. Get ready, because this is your big opportunity." Chloe exchanged a knowing glance with Dylan, who took a deep breath. "We're ready. We hardly slept, but we're confident." The mentor smiled, nodding. "That's the right attitude. You can use the main stage if you want, or just gather everyone around a large table, whatever suits you." They opted for the large table, as it felt more informal and invited people to come closer and listen. Arranged in a semicircle, some investors waited curiously. There were also local business owners, small chain operators, and even people from food cooperatives. When Dylan and Chloe approached, they greeted everyone with polite handshakes. Many recognized Dylan by name, aware of his background with a renowned company. Some were unaware of his dismissal, only suspecting that something significant had prompted his change in direction. Chloe, on the other hand, was a new face, but her determined expression did not go unnoticed. Dylan started the presentation with clarity, devoid of arrogance but with the confidence of someone well-versed in the business world. He spoke of his experience and the desire to create a consultancy balancing profits and human values. Chloe complimented his points by explaining how they could offer creative solutions even to smaller merchants who needed professional guidance but couldn't afford the exorbitant costs of large consultancies. There was excitement in their voices, and it was infectious to the audience. However, in the back of her mind, Chloe remembered the message. The truth will come to light. She feared that Grace or Dylan's ex-boss might walk through the door at any moment to sabotage the event, but she refused to let this thought destabilize her, choosing instead to focus on the smiles and questions from the audience. Midway through the presentation, the doors creaked open. Glancing briefly, Dylan and Chloe stopped speaking. The figure entering did not surprise Dylan. It was Grace, dressed in an elegant yet somewhat inappropriate business outfit. Behind her was Dylan's ex-boss, his face stern. Chloe's heart raced. She was certain they had come to ruin the moment, just as they had threatened. A murmur spread through the room. Some people recognized Grace, while others whispered upon seeing Dylan's ex-boss. Maintaining his composure, Dylan shot them a determined look, signaling he would not be intimidated. Grace, feigning delicacy, approached the semicircle of listeners. "What a lovely presentation, Dylan," she said with a biting smile. "I heard you now have a whole theory about business and less privileged people. I find your new role as a philanthropist so charming." The ex-boss spoke in a theatrical tone, drawing everyone's attention. And to think, not long ago, Dylan was one of the most promising executives at our company. He had everything to succeed. But he paused dramatically, as if expecting the audience to turn toward him. It seems he made questionable decisions, involving even a homeless person, and ended up being dismissed. Chloe's expression darkened, understanding that they were there to expose her. Dylan took a deep breath, resolved not to back down. "Do you have something to say?" he asked, facing the ex-boss without flinching. Grace raised her chin, letting out a mocking laugh. "Actually, yes. For those who don't know, this girl with Dylan used to live on the streets. He took her in under, let's say, questionable circumstances, and we thought it was important to reveal this, as it says a lot about her character and his." Some people in the audience widened their eyes, exchanging confused glances. Chloe felt a lump in her throat, but before fear could take hold, Dylan intervened, his voice firm. "That's right. Chloe went through hard times and has nothing to hide. She never pretended to be anything other than who she is. In fact, she's the one who opened my eyes to the injustices in how many businesses operate. She made me realize I was wasting my life in a company that didn't value people." The ex-boss frowned, already displeased with Dylan's stance. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about someone without status or qualifications. Is it really worth trusting the advice and services of such a duo?" Chloe finally found her voice, addressing the entrepreneurs and investors before her. "I may not have a prestigious degree, but I can guarantee I know what it's like to face real struggles. And if your goal is to achieve success in a more humane way, Dylan and I are here to help. If you prefer to follow examples of those who exploit employees and humiliate vulnerable people, that's your choice." There was a moment of silence, interrupted by an approving murmur among some attendees. Grace and the ex-boss exchanged glances, realizing Chloe's response was stronger than they had anticipated. Dylan's mentor stepped forward, clearing his throat to draw attention. "Well, I believe everyone here has seen enough. Dylan and Chloe, are you ready to continue your presentation? If so, let's return to our seats and hear more about your consultancy." Several heads nodded in agreement, making it clear to Grace and the ex-boss that their interruption had not had the desired effect. Grace attempted one last move. "I was about to announce that this gentleman's company is willing to secure a large contract with any entrepreneurs, provided they avoid scandals. Perhaps it would be in your interest to discard this duo and partner with us," she suggested, addressing the entrepreneurs as if her offer were irresistible. However, one local investor raised his hand, interjecting, "Sorry, but we're not interested in methods based on blackmail and humiliating people. For us, Dylan and Chloe's approach makes much more sense. We want to build something different." Grace and the ex-boss were left speechless. One by one, the entrepreneurs and investors expressed that they would remain attentive to Dylan's proposals. The tide was turning rapidly. Realizing they would not achieve their intended outcome, Grace cast Dylan a look of rage and embarrassment before storming out. The ex-boss followed, shooting Chloe one last scornful glance, which she met with steady resolve. With their departure, the atmosphere became surprisingly light, as if a weight had been lifted. Scattered applause spread through the room. The mentor, pleased, asked Dylan and Chloe to pick up where they had left off. They continued, answering questions and providing examples of how they intended to assist each business present. Amid the Christmas lights, Dylan and Chloe brought forth a renewed and purposeful version of themselves. They spoke of honesty, empathy, and how good business could be done without stepping on others. By the end, they were met with applause, and several entrepreneurs expressed interest in concrete partnerships. The outcome was better than they could have dreamed. When everything ended, some investors approached for conversations. One even expressed willingness to sign a letter of intent, giving Dylan and Chloe the confidence they needed to formalize their consultancy. The mentor beamed with pride, as if confirming he had bet on the right people. For Chloe, it was a dream, a Christmas miracle affirming her worth despite all the humiliation she had endured. For Dylan, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, free from the stifling constraints of the past. As the last entrepreneurs dispersed, the mentor announced he would follow up in the coming days to formalize everything. Dylan and Chloe, exhausted but overflowing with joy, walked to a quieter part of the hall where a Christmas tree stood adorned with colorful decorations. The sound of bells in the background reminded them that the evening had only begun but already held so much promise. Dylan took a deep breath, gazing at the twinkling lights on the ornaments. He then looked at Chloe, who was smiling as she admired the sparkling decorations. Sensing his gaze, she turned, confused, as he pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that had once been a source of embarrassment. The same ring Grace had rejected, the same ring symbolizing a commitment that had never materialized. "I thought about returning this to the jeweler," he admitted, opening the box. "But over time I realized I was waiting for the right moment to give it to someone who truly wanted to build something with me. It doesn't have to be a marriage proposal, but I'd like you to accept it as a sign that I trust you." Chloe felt tears welling up, overwhelmed, but also shy. "Dylan, I don't know if I'm ready for something this serious." He smiled, stepping closer. "You don't have to be. We can build things step by step, but I want you to have it as a symbol of my respect and love for who you are." With her heart racing, she took the box, gazing at the silver ring that seemed to shine brighter in the light of the Christmas tree. Without further hesitation, she nodded, her throat tight with emotion. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling happiness wash over her. As snowflakes began to fall, Dylan and Chloe shared a timid kiss. The message was clear. Love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even on a cold sidewalk at Christmas. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.